I'm Dr. Gloria Lattimore Peace, host and producer of OmniU Presents the H3O Art of Life show. The title of this show is Inner City Struggles, Local and National. I thought of that all by myself. And I want to greet my guest, Dr. Robert T. Starks, political science professor at the Carruthers Center for Inner City Studies of Northeastern Illinois University, and Mr. Frank Williams, communiversity professor at the Carruthers Center for Inner City Studies. I think it's just remarkable that I have this colleague whose name is Professor Robert T. Starks, who actually has a very wonderful essay in a book called Phoenix Rising, in which he goes back down through the Chicago struggle, and he looks at, he doesn't confine himself to Chicago, but he actually looks at the struggle in other parts of the country, and then he talks about his participation in it and the relationships that he had, and the people that he met and the people with whom he worked. And somehow in the course of that, he overlooked the fact that I had been his colleague for 28 years. And I told him that I was not going to forgive him for that, but I'm here to publicly forgive you for your sin of omission.
And it is a sin, absolutely.
Because you're not going to write me out of history.
No,
now, I may not be in that book, but I might just write one of my own, so there.
Well, I just want the world to know that Dr. Lattimore was one of our most prolific faculty members, and she was the best editor in the whole building. People would write stuff and then ask her to edit it because she knew the English language, and she did it extremely well, and students loved her, and they were upset when she retired. You retired early, didn't you?
I retired when Harold Pace showed me in black and white that I was working for nothing.
Yeah.
He said that there was nowhere, he said there was nowhere for me to go, because even if I added years, it didn't add to the pension. Right. So I was where I was going to be, whether I continued to work, or whether I retired. So I opted to retire, and then there are some people like Bob Starks, who, you know, I have other friends like you who pretend that they retire, but then they sneak back and work. So it's all right. Somebody has to carry on until sufficient replacements are in place. Tell me what it is you do there now that you are teaching only 1 or 2 classes.
Right. Well, I see students, and for some reason, people think I'm there full-time every day, and when I come in on that one day to teach, I have phone calls, and then I have notes saying, this person showed up thinking I was here, and I'm saying, I gotta somehow cut this down a little bit, you know? And then secondly, I always do the planning for the communiversity and the African book review, which happens, the communiversities every 2nd and 4th Saturdays from 10 until 3, and the book review is every 3rd Saturday from, again, 10 to 3. So I do the planning for them. And
I think Frank knows something about the communiversity from before your time, maybe. Frank, talk to me about the communiversity, because you started naming names like Bobby Wright and so forth, and Rhodes and all back there. When you came into the communiversity, you had to be a youngster.
I was.
Okay.
Bob was already there.
That's right.
Okay.
Bob was already there.
I'll tell you about, let him go, but I'll tell you how I got started.
Okay. Well, somebody tell me about the communiversity at the start, because I know about it, but I don't know how it started.
Let me tell you. Do you know, of course, Stan Willis, right?
Of
Attorney
course.
Stan Willis.
I've had Stan Willis on my show.
Absolutely. Stan and I was at Loyola. Stan was at then called Crane, which he and Henry English forced the name changed to Malcolm X. So we Stan at the time was a bus driver, and they had the big bus strike, right? So he called me and he said, look, man, we got this Black Studies thing is just going wild. We got to have a meeting. So we sat down over about a month meeting at my house, and we made the plans, and we had a student conference at Reverend Porter's church at 64th and Saint.
I know about Reverend Porter and his church.
And he allowed us to have it, and we started on Friday and went all the way through Saturday, and we had Dick Gregory, we had, I mean, everybody you could name was there, and students from all around the state. And 2 people were sitting in the audience, and we didn't even think that they were paying us any attention, and that was Harold Pates and Anderson Thompson. The 2 of them went back and said, look, what we did, what the students did is fine, but we got to start a community university. And that's how it got started.
Oh, okay. All right. So now where did you come in, Frank?
Well, I came in, I met a fellow by the name of J. Wayne Tukes. And we were working in the Model Cities program in June of 1970. And we got to talking. And he told me, he said, brother, he said when he looked at me, he said, I had a curly natural. He said, well, the brother got on jungle fatigues and a curly natural. What manner of man? We were talking, and we were talking on the same common vein. So he told me, it's a place that you need to go to called a community university. And that was 1970 when I met him. So 1 year later, I went down to community university. It was right down the street from where I stayed, but I didn't know. So he said, man, you got a lot of things on your mind. You need to go to the community university. And that's when I came to community university. And the first person I keyed into was Dr. Bobby Wright. And Bobby Wright saw certain things in me after about maybe 5 or 6 months there. And he told me, he encouraged me to have my own class. Then I was 21 going on 22, and he encouraged me to have my own class. But even though my father, based on the condition, the colonized condition of our people, was in that state, it was certain things that he told me that put me on in a playing field where I can deal with older adults. He pulled my coat. So when he pulled my coat, I knew how to conduct myself, and I was more mature beyond my years by being around my father and uncles. And so that made me acceptable to Brother Pates and Brother Bobby. I knew when to talk and when to keep my mouth closed and listen. And certain things that they were saying in the community university, I had been dealing with on my own. And then I said, man, here's the answer right here. I've been dealing with this by myself. And then here these people are with this community university. And from there, Dr. Cliff Washington
Pates
saw certain things in me too, and had me, because he was the dean of students at Roosevelt University in the Upper Bound program. He hired me as a head counselor. And of course, that made a lot of people angry because I'd come in and be a head counselor. But he saw the maturity in me. And of course, I would tell the young people down there, particularly the young ladies, because I wasn't much older than them, when they say that you're not much older than us, why you acting like that? And I said, well, maybe not much older than you, but I'm 20 years older than you. And your parents didn't send you down here to fraternize with me. And if I fraternize with you, I compromise my position. And
one of your co-workers was Sister Myers.
Yes, Sister Myers.
Myers. Yes. Robert, you in your essay, and you're talking about the Chicago struggle. The Chicago struggle was always the inner city struggle. And I always define the inner city as anywhere black people are.
That's precisely correct.
And so the Chicago struggle was peopled by some people who were so-called progressive, and then it was also peopled by the Silent Six, who sat in the city council and did nothing more than rubber stamp whatever the mayor put forward. And so we had an absence of leadership, which led us to a situation where we used to call Leon Dupre our black representative.
Exactly.
Because he would take on the city council with all of these injustices that they were visiting on the inner city community, whereas our own people, and I don't want to even name them, whereas some of our own people who were elected by us to represent us failed to do that. Now, talk about the inner city struggle vis-a-vis the political aspect of that struggle, trying to get some representation or some recognition somewhere.
Well, it's good you brought that point up, because the people who were most active, who took us from that point to where we elected Harold Washington, were outside of the political arena. They were fighting. You were a part of that group on the west side with the
we had the Chicago League of Negro Voters
League
on
of
the
Negro
west side.
Voters, and you sponsored and ran the first African American to run in a citywide
He ran for city
election.
clerk.
For city clerk, right. So you had the west side struggling, and that included
Bernetta Howell,
Burnett,
Bennett Johnson, Luster Jackson,
Gus
Savage.
Gus Savage, right.
Well, we needed to have started with Gus Savage. Right.
And the Shaw Boys, they
Right.
were there, the two twins. So you had that. Then on the south side, you had people like
Anna Langford,
and the funeral home.
Ray Rayner.
Rayner.
So you had people, and then you had groups like SNCC, and I was a member of SNCC, right? And you had
Well, I
CORE.
never associated SNCC so much with the Chicago struggle.
Oh yeah.
Okay, straighten that out for me.
Well, I was the founder of the Loyola Friends of SNCC, and we had people like Bob Brown, who was working with me, and we were the ones who helped put together the March on Washington. The March on Washington, of course, had a big office in the old Union Hall of the Meatpackers Hall at 48th and Wabash, right? So we had that. And we were the ones who helped put together the 1963 boycott, school boycott, and there's a film about that that's just come out.
For some reason, I thought we started that.
Well, of course, all of
go ahead.
people on the west side and the south side came together because that was the largest demonstration in Chicago in many, many years.
Frank, were you on the west side at the time of the boycott? Were you too young? You were a little boy then.
Well,
maybe.
Well, you talking about the time the Willis wagons?
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, okay, I was
1963.
Okay.
1963.
So you were in school. Well, let me feed into that, Bob. So I'm a young mother and I have children in school. And we had the most ridiculous situation. We not only had the Willis wagons, but in the school building itself, we had triple shift. Now, I know you've heard of double shift.
Oh, of course we knew about
8 to
double
12, 12 to 4. Well, we had a shift that overlapped that shift. We also discovered that they had cleaned out the janitor's broom closet and made no windows, you understand, made a classroom in there. They were so busy, and this is your cue, Frank. They were so busy keeping us from crossing those boundary lines, you know, those invisible lines, those lines they put on paper that say, I lived at one point at Ogden near California. The line was drawn in the middle of Ogden. Everybody north of Ogden had to go to this school, and we could see across the street there was a school that had empty classrooms. You could see that there was nobody in those rooms all day. And then other rooms, you could see that there were very few people. They restricted us to certain areas, even though there were schools with classrooms available. Now, who was on the other side of Ogden, Frank?
Well, I was at Roosevelt and Lido and Troop, and the Jane Addams Housing Development. That's where I was in the first ward.
Okay.
And I was going.
What kind of people were living across on the west side in places where black people were not?
Well,
who were these people that we were not allowed to go to school with? Is what I'm trying to get to.
When my mother moved, I'm going to still tell you when my mother moved there. My mother moved into Jane Addams Housing Development in 1951. I was 2, and my late sister was 1. We were the 6th African-American family to move there. It was predominantly Italian.
It was Italian,
Italian, and it didn't become, in the subsequent years after 1951, I'd say about 53, and the preceding years, more Afro-Americans started coming in. And by 1959, and by 1960, it had become predominantly African-American there. But we were still with a juxtaposition between them and us, because you couldn't go east on Taylor Street because they were saturated there, and you couldn't go further west toward Oakley because all that whole strip was Italian, and you couldn't go north of Cabrini because that was a little park we used to call Peanut Park, because it was a little small park because you had the Our Lady of Pompeii Church right there at Arthington. So these were the boundaries, and they still have the building up there, but it's a condo. That was Mother Cabrini. We dare not go there. You see, so we were just like boxed in. But as far as the school was concerned, because of where we were.
Exactly, that's the point. The point is that we were black people who had been living in Chicago. I've been here since I was 5. We were living in Chicago all this time, but we couldn't go across the street to a school with empty classrooms. So they put these demountables, these Willis wagons, on the school playground, which took away our place for recreation, put them on the school playgrounds, overcrowded the classrooms, had children in school 3 shifts a day. So we protested that. And we protested that with Gus Savage as our spokesperson.
And what was the name of your newspaper that you had at that time?
It was the Lawndale Booster. The Lawndale Booster newspaper. So Gus Savage was our spokesperson. So we started out in the school building with the principal, who tried to tell us that everything was fine and that we didn't have any real reason to be concerned about it. So we left her and went to the district superintendent, because you have to go up the chain of command. The district superintendent was supposed to stop us. Whatever was going to happen that was going to keep us from continuing this protest was supposed to stop with him. It didn't stop with him because Gus Savage was not that kind of man.
Absolutely.
And so we left him on our way to see Benjamin. And they made some changes, some personnel changes, not much in the way of school redistricting, because they believed in the concept of neighborhood schools.
Absolutely.
The children should go to school in the neighborhood with the people that they know best, which meant that as long as they considered the neighborhood, these boundaries these artificial boundaries they created, this was where our children had to go to school, despite the fact that they were building public housing, but they didn't seem to know that these apartments were going to have people living in them. So you build 2-story buildings, 8 or 10 stories tall, with 10 apartments on each floor for families with children, and you don't increase the size of the school. So the school is sitting down there being a little schoolhouse that was there when there were only a few houses dotted around in this community. Now you've got hundreds of people in the community. The school is not adequate to house them, but you're going to force them to stay in there. Well, we weren't taking no for an answer. They sent the politicians, they sent the ward committeeman, they sent you always had the precinct captain. The precinct captain came to try to see who he could buy out and who he could get to defect. We all loved our children, so nobody was willing to defect. So you had the precinct captain, you had the ward committeeman, you had the alderman. Then they sent the social service agency people who came down under the guise of they wanted to help you, when what they wanted to do was to exploit the situation. So it was a real hard struggle, but finally they built a school at the corner of Roosevelt and California, and it stands there today as the outcome of the protest. So that's what we did on the west side with this school situation, and it was a time when you saw more unity among our people than you had seen in a long time, because we know we will stick together around our children. You know, no issue will unify black people any more than the welfare of their young. They will defend and protect their young, or at least that used to be. Is that still the case?
Yeah, I think
it's touch and go. It's touch and go now, because the family values have been delineated. And I would say too that it was a push and pull with us as a people. We had proactive overtones when we were under restrictive covenants, but they weren't institutionalized. It didn't become a social theory. And when it doesn't become a social theory, it'll wane. Now, I was the type of child, and that if it had a social theory, a lot of the questions that I was going through me would have been answered. But it didn't happen like that. I was the kind of person that I had to know when, where, why, and how. You had to answer me. You had to answer up to me. So a lot of times I got slapped in the mouth because I refused to shut up. Because if what you said to me didn't make sense, it didn't make sense, and I just wasn't going to accept it like that. I didn't know why. I said, well, as time went on, I said it was the ancestors. Because without an institution, there was nothing else to make me think that way but the ancestors. So but I said where we were, because we didn't go through that kind of turmoil, it's only because we sat in the first ward. Not that they care about us in the first ward, but we was unbeknownst to us, geographically located in an area where that didn't affect us so much, so to speak. Because I say what affects you affects me too. You see, so groups deal with groups, not individuals. So it's affecting me. It affects me when I don't align myself with you, because I'm over here. Then colonization has already worked its head. Because now I'm like a safe slave.
Well, two things. One, I think Daly lived in the first ward at that time, didn't he?
No, he was in the 11th ward. This was right up under the viaduct.
Right,
This was right up under the viaduct.
You're right. It was 11th ward. But here's the thing: isn't it ironic the games that politicians play on African Americans? Remember the big push at the time that we're talking about, early '60s, '63, when the big boycott came. You got to go to the school in your neighborhood, right? Neighborhood schools, right? Now we come to 2002, and this fool, 2000, when does he close down the school? 2013. And he says, forget about neighborhood schools. We're gonna close 50 schools, and you go to a school wherever you can get in. Cross gang lines, and kids get hurt. So now what you do is you go and get a plan that was started by us at the Black United Fund. They expanded it, and you have the crossing guards and all these people with the little shirts on, supposedly providing safe passage for the children, right? That's a pacification program. Now they do help children, but it provides, I think, like $10 an hour or something for the people.
Well, it's a double-edged sword, Bob.
Precisely.
Because they made the conditions in our schools so deplorable
Precisely.
that our own people were abandoning the schools. You know, how can you want to send your children to school when they are in danger going to and from the school?
Lead poisoning inside the school, crumbling walls. I mean, all kinds of problems.
Lead in the water.
That's right.
You know, which is something that we find out of late.
Right.
But the thing is that there may still be in effect a policy that the unseasoned teachers were the teachers, except for black teachers, all the black teachers were confined to the black schools. But the unseasoned white teachers were the teachers that they sent to the black schools. And very often they would displace black teachers in their own schools.
And they
at the time of the bus boycott, I mean the school bus boycott, I remember this clearly, that they actually had buses who would bring the white teachers to the school and take them from the school.
And they would leave exactly at 3 o'clock.
They did not have to park their cars in the parking lot. They didn't have to take any, they took no risks. Now why is it that you have to bus in some teachers when there are black teachers who would love to be employed, especially when it's conveniently located and they can just come, you know, right from home and go to school. So you had that kind of situation. Then there was this question of the substitute teachers.
Oh yes, oh yeah.
Which was a farce, because I worked with teachers who regularly got excellent and above excellent ratings, but they were called FTBs, which was full-time basis teachers, which meant that they didn't get the perks that came along with being, say, a certified teacher. Certified teachers got vacations, they got sick days, they got holidays, they got pay increases, they got treated like human beings. They didn't have to worry about being, if they were assigned at a school, they didn't have to worry about being upended and sent someplace else. But the full-time substitute teachers always had to be concerned whether or not they would be reassigned the following year. So they were always on a temporary basis, even though they were doing the same work. If you walked down a corridor in a school and looked in classrooms or went in and observed, you couldn't tell a full-time basis teacher from a certified teacher, because they were equally well educated and they were equally good at what they did. So it was a farce. So when we had the school boycott, I was a certified teacher. I came in as a certified teacher. I hit the picket line. The principal looked out the window and saw me out there and said, "What are you doing out there? Because you don't have, this is not," yes it is. Because my view of it was that if the full-time basis teachers are inferior, then they don't need to be in the classroom. But if they are equipped to do the job that regular teachers are doing, then they should be paid and they should be treated. You don't let a lawyer, if a lawyer, he can't be a substitute lawyer.
No way.
If he can't practice law, if he can't practice law. So this was, it was just foolish. So they thought that they would be able to hold the full-time basis teachers out there because the certified teachers were going to go past the picket line and go in the classroom and help keep the classrooms open for the missing teachers, but they found out that they had to pull administrators out of the district offices to man those classrooms, and those people didn't like being in the classroom.
You know, there was a man, he became superintendent. I think he was one of the first superintendents of the Atlanta public school system, named Alonzo Crim. Alonzo Crim was my 8th grade teacher. Alonzo Crim was teaching us things in classroom about geography and groups that I never seen that from another teacher. Then we had Mr. Butler, who these teachers were multifaceted teachers. They could teach biology, math. They could teach. They had accelerated classes. Where a teacher was teaching 6th, 7th, and 8th grade from the 6th grade, and that was Miss Murray, Thelma Murray. But when I look at that school, because it was the same school, I was kicked out in 1st grade. See, I was kicked out of school in 1st grade.
Well, now, I don't know whether we can allow you to say that, because some young person might be watching this show and think that they should
No, see.
emulate you.
But I say that because it had a profound effect on me educating myself.
I'm sure it did.
My mother, they met my mother. She kept going back and forth to the Board of Education. She didn't know about Thurgood Marshall and this was 1955, 1 year after Thurgood Marshall landmark. We going back and forth to the Board of Education. To finally one day she said, I'm not going back to him anymore.
Why were you going back and forth to the Board of Education?
Well, she's trying to get me back in school.
Oh, well,
And
why
so what
were
she
you
did-
kicked out? We got to first find out why you got kicked out of school in the 1st grade.
Well, if I may tell you the truth now, I'm going to tell you the truth. A white teacher pinched me and I smacked her. I smacked her so hard that she had my handprint on her face. And so they told my mother something wrong with him. She said, no, ain't nothing wrong with him. She had no business putting her hands on him. I'm his mother. So when she couldn't get me back in school, she had school with me. She had the first homeschooling. She had the first homeschooling. And there was no homeschooling. She had a lesson plan. Every 2 weeks we had a review. We had school 7 days a week, and at the end of the month we had a test. And when they wouldn't take me, she finally got me in Catholic school at St. Joseph's. It used to be on 13th Street. She got me in there, and they said, "Well, he's gonna be behind." She said, "No, he's not. Not with all the work I didn't put in with him. Give him a test." They gave me a test. She was teaching me long division when I was 6 years old, 6, 7 years old. She was teaching me double multiplications. I knew all of that because, and she had, when the school bell rang, I went outside. I was the only kid outside playing. And then when it was time for the kids to go back to school, then I had a lesson plan. And she taught me. So what that did to me, Sister Gloria, what it did to me was it made me say, I don't need to go to them to legitimize my genius. My mother taught me I can teach me.
Please tell me that you did go to school some more, though, after the 1st grade.
Well, I did go to school. And I graduated. I went as far as the 3rd year of Crane High School.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So I'm
and
glad
some things happened along the path.
Didn't end your.
Yeah. but school by the time, but it had such an impact on me. It might have slipped some other kid, but I said, if my mother can teach me. And they didn't even want me to go to school. My mother had to struggle to teach me, then I can teach me. I can teach myself languages, and then I would have a better perspective. I wouldn't be honed in by a syllabus, nobody telling me what to do. I can use critical thinking because I had a critical mind. I had a critical mind, but without people with a social theory, couldn't nobody capture that. Couldn't nobody capture that. You know, I was way ahead of my time.
I can see that.
And I had a knack for, even though it was the racial prejudice over there, to go past that and look at people and say, what are they trying to hide from me that they don't want me to be bothered with them? And I could see something getting in my mind said, when I first moved over here, my mother had an Italian friend named Rose. She came in the project later, by maybe 1954. She taught my mother how to cook Sicilian cooking. My mother taught her how to cook soul food. So they were hooked up like that. And you could walk down Taylor Street at the time I was little, and you can hear Italian spoken from different dialects from one end of Taylor Street all the way to Oakley. And then I didn't hear that no more when I got about 11. And that these Italians that I ran into was real prejudice, real prejudice. But I ran into one boy, and he let me come to his house. The people that come from the old country. And if my mother had known I'd been eating in their house, she'd have beat my brains out, you know. You didn't do that even if they were Afro-American. You didn't go eating out of somebody's house. So they let me, and so I would hear Italian dialect spoken. And so one day, they use the N-word with me, these other Italians. And it's out of the blue. I said, can you speak Italian? And he said, what difference does it? I said, can you speak Italian? And he said, no, I can't speak Italian. What about it? I said, you Italian and can't speak your own language? I don't know what made me say that at 11 years old. Well, how much Italian are you and you can't speak your own language? But as I started studying my history, I would go back to my childhood. I didn't want to study nothing unless I had a voice in it. So if I studied it, I can study it with intensity and critical thinking, because it was me. I would be the author of it. And so I would go, every time I would go to history, I would always go back to my childhood and come back. And I would use that. And I picked up the Italian dialect. I picked up Spanish. I picked up Portuguese. I picked up some African language, the tones. I found out we had Puerto Ricans in the neighborhood. And my people come from New Orleans, so they had the same kind of Creole cooking. They call it in Spanish la cocina criolla, which means Creole cooking. And I could see the certain nuances in them that was just like us. And then as I started studying them, I found out that they were just only part of the diaspora, but they dropped slaves there just like they did here. So they had the same gestures. I would watch their gestures. I would watch how they would easily adapt to our dialect and slang.
These are Puerto Ricans now that
Puerto
you're
Ricans.
talking about.
Yeah.
Now you see why he's been an instructor at Kim University.
Right,
Absolutely,
right,
absolutely,
right.
yeah.
I wanted to ask you about your role, though, in the bus boycott, because I'm on the west side. I'm
Right, okay.
interested in what your role was in that.
Well, our little group of people raised money to help back, because you had to have little drinks and food and stuff to help with the kids. We did that. We
had Freedom Schools.
Right, we had Freedom
Right.
Schools, and we helped set those up, and we went door to door to sign people up. And you're right, many people just volunteered, said, yeah, I'll be there, my kids will be there, don't worry about it. And we went all up and down, because at that time I had moved to the south side, so we were in South Shore. So we went all around South Shore and signed people up, and the kids turned out. We had, I guess, someone estimated almost 200,000 people in that boycott downtown.
Right.
And
Well, education, the struggle for education has been ongoing, because
Ever since.
when I was teaching elementary school, when the boycott took place, then at some point I was teaching high school English at a West Side high school. And the young people walked out of the classes because their argument was they were not receiving quality education. They were promptly arrested for boycotting the classes. So then we have this big rally over at a Southside church where Dr. Barbara Sizemore
Yes.
was the speaker. And teachers want to raise money so we can get our children out of jail. And the thing that was so telling for me was that we were in those schools teaching, and we knew that our children were being shortchanged. But we weren't doing anything about it as a profession or even as colleagues in a given school. Each person was doing their individual thing. Like, I was called on the carpet for teaching Negro history, and it wasn't even Negro History Week. Because you weren't supposed to have Negro history except Negro History Week in February. So I had to defend myself. So any teacher who was doing something outside of the prescribed curriculum was likely to get not only called on the carpet, but get dismissed as a result of that. But we were in the schools, and we knew that the students, I knew, for example, when I went to teach high school English, that there was not a syllabus in the building for teaching sophomore English. I had to write it. And I said, well, wait a minute, how is this school operating if they've got a sophomore English class and nobody has ever written anything about what this class is supposed to be learning? This is so utterly and completely ridiculous. But I'm saying that our children have been doing almost what you're doing. They have been virtually educating themselves
Absolutely.
with the help of some teachers who were conscientious enough to go beyond the call of the standard duty to see that children learn. But they arrested our children for boycotting,
That's
for
incredible.
walking out of the schools.
That is incredible.
We had to raise funds to get them out of jail, and there was a lot that happened after that. You know, a lot of that I guess say snatched the cover off the situation again, because why did we fall asleep again, Robert?
We always do
after
that.
every one of these
struggles.
situations where we have to protest and march and make people stop abusing us, or make people let us have some opportunity that we were deserving of in the first place. Why is it that after we go home and act as though we have won the war?
Right,
When I was a kid, and when I started doing research on my family, because I went all the way back to 1880 in Louisiana on my family. I mean to 1800. When I was a kid, when all the other kids would be outside playing, I always wanted to stay up under the grown folks. They had to put me out. Go find him, because he's around here listening to us. But I was always inquisitive about people and their nature. And I've seen then, and people might say I'm wrong, but I could care less, is that there was an ambivalence between us then. It was hidden, because you didn't have no more than I had. So we had to be together. But there was bickering, it was jealousy. Oh, she thinks she better than somebody. She living in the projects just like me. So when so-called integration came, those nuances that I heard as a kid, people broke. As if whatever happened to us that held us together never even existed. And so, because I had to find a reason to why would we, like you saying, these struggles we in, and then we drop them. And so it's a thing there that, definitely they didn't teach it in no schools. Colonization. It's the colonization. And colonization, Gloria, is like an addict going through the 12-step program. If he or she don't keep the fact that they've been addicted in front of them, they'll go back to relapsing. And when you talk about people with hundreds of years of colonization,
Oh, Lord,
constantly
black
relapsing.
people relapse.
Every time. But I was wondering, now, Jane Addams was surrounded by Italians.
yeah.
Did you all go to school with Italians?
Yes, I went to, let me tell you what happened to me. When they tore down St. Joseph, which was more predominantly African American, they sent me to Holy Family. And I said then, is my mother crazy? Sending me to a Holy Family, and we fighting these Italians in the street, and I'm in the heart of Little Italy? I ain't gonna be in this school long. And I remember, you talking about this pedophilia that was going on in the church. When I was an altar boy, this priest said to me, can I say something to you? And I said, yeah, what is it, Father? Anybody tell you that you were nice looking? And I said, what did you say to me? He said that you was nice. And first of all, I was suspicious of him saying anything to me being of a different color hue, and then to compliment me, I was kind of suspicious. Then I said, I'm nice looking. He said, yeah. I said, what you doing telling me I'm nice looking and you a man? I'm gonna tell my father. You a man, what you talking about I'm nice looking? And he said, well, wait a minute, son, wait a minute. I said, don't you say that to me no more. I was about 11. So my mind was always, I was always, because he could have had me, see? But I was always suspicious. I mean, why, in other words, why did I deserve so much generosity? Why you so nice to me when we fighting y'all right out here? And I found out about religion and church. Religions are based on culture,
Of course.
not what we thought it was.
Precisely.
Whatever was perpetuated in that Italian school and church was reinforcing that Italian home.
Precisely.
I got to see that. Because when that nun when that nun slapped my face because the boy blacked my sister's eye, and I knocked him through a window, I said to her, you know, I couldn't say it here.
You're not a King follower then. You don't believe in nonviolence.
I said, what did you slap me in my face for? And she said, what do you mean when I slapped you in the face? I said, but I said some other things to her too, but I can't say on this program. But I took a pointer and smacked her across her head, and the thing turned like the habit they wear on the head. And the school was an old school building. I remember I said, I might as well go for broke, because I didn't hit her upside the head. My mother gonna deal with me. So I just cracked her back. I took the back end of the thing, and I ran her all the way through the school, and they had my papers already prepared to get me out of there. But my father wasn't baptized into that mess, because he said, don't nobody tell me what to eat. Nobody tell me what to do. I'm making money. I'm the man in my house. So he didn't get into baptism. But he asked me, well, my mother said, he hit a nun. My father said, wait a minute. We ain't heard his story. What happened, man? Because they never my father never called me and my brother boy. And I found out my grandfather said he was tired of white people calling grown men boy, and he said if he ever had male sons, he would never call them boy. He would always address them as man. So he called me, man, what happened? And I told him, he said, oh, wait a minute. Don't nobody outside of me put their hands on my child, and especially not them. And he had some derogatory things to say about them that I can't say here. And my mother had to beg him not to go up there. He had to beg him. She almost was on her knees begging him not to go up there, because he wasn't indoctrinated in that. He wasn't indoctrinated.
You know what, you said something that I can't stop thinking about, because I knew this, but I forgot it, Bob. We forgot this, that whenever we are about to break through, they always open the door and let a few of us in. That's why we relapse.
That's right.
Because they give some of us a privileged position, or they let some of us come out of the field into the yard, or some of us come out of the yard into the house. That happened on the West Side when we were going to run another candidate for office, and we had gotten all the petition signatures, all the stuff that you need to have, and had filed them. And he went to City Hall, I guess 1 second before the polls closed, and withdrew.
And they took him in the room and told him to withdraw, or else he would die.
And he disappeared.
Damn real.
I don't know where he went from there, but I'm saying that
I've heard that story before.
You've heard the story. Okay, so here's what you have. You have either the carrot or the stick. When the pressure gets great, either you get some people who get, and I had that happen personally to me, to an organization, that they gave one person a crossing guard job. They gave another person a job as a janitor. They gave, all of a sudden, the whole organization was overtaken with all these privileges that these people were given, and now they can't participate. So we have people bought out from under us, threatened out from under us, assassinated.
Well, Ben Lewis, you know, I remember that.
God knows we remember that.
I remember that. I remember that.
Yeah.
Yes,
because you know
absolutely.
one thing they did do that I took advantage of. They used to have current events, and I wouldn't get the Sun Times or Daily News. I would go and get papers like the Washington Post, because I was being more competitive. The Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, New York Times. Some of the papers I was getting, I wouldn't tell nobody that I was getting that information, because they were more extensive. So I could be more competitive against the others. They gave us prizes, so I would win them, because I would get papers outside that I know people weren't reading. And I would even read the Italian paper, because I taught myself how to read Italian, La Stampa Sera. And I would get that on Randolph, as an Italian dude that knew me, and we would talk back in Italian. And he got a kick out of me doing that.
Well, Gloria, at some point we got to come back and talk about the master plan instituted by Old Man Daly, where he put the expressway together, put the UIC where it is, and then built the State Street corridor with all those, public housing.
We do have to come back because I keep hearing music playing, sounding like they trying to tell me something. Because that's extremely important. I remember when they picked the church up and moved it across the expressway to the other side.
And the church that my great aunt died in.
The Progressive Baptist Church.
And do you understand? Well, everybody understands that the place that they put the expressway right along Bridgeport was to keep black folks on the east side of the expressway and not go into Bridgeport.
You know what,
where old man Daly lived.
There was a lady, but by the time she ran for office, it was too much suspicion. Her name was Florence Scala. Yes, I remember Florence Scala coming in
She had a restaurant.
Right. I remember Florence Scala in 1964 coming in.